So I kind of want to flip the script here a little bit in how we're looking at closure, because for me, as a verbal processor, closure for me has always been a conversation. It's always been withdrawal was awful for me. I could not stand that. It was immediate abandonment to me when someone withdrew from a conversation, and I would just keep going after it. We've got to talk this through. We've got to figure this out. And I've had to learn to kind of take a step back and realize, wait, that's not how everyone processes things. But closure itself isn't what I was getting when out of that conversation. Like, closure is not just what happens when you talk to someone. It's not just that moment when they finally say the right thing or getting your point across to them so that they'll finally understand it. That's not what we're actually seeking here, even though it feels good to think that it is, because then we have control over the situation, right? Then we can do something about it. But what real closure is when you're in these painful emotional dynamics, it's not the conversation, it's not the finally being believed. It's when your mind and your body finally come into agreement about what it is that you've experienced, or what you've been experiencing, or what you are experiencing. Hey there, and welcome to the Reclamation Room. I'm Ashana, and I'm so glad you're here. This is a space for women reclaiming themselves after narcissistic abuse. If you've ever felt like you were too much, not enough, or both at the same time, you're in the right place. I created this podcast because I know what it's like to lose yourself in overgiving, overperforming, and still wondering why it never felt like love. I've walked through trauma, toxic relationships, and the long road of self-reclamation, and I'm here to walk with you. In this podcast, we'll explore what it means to come home to yourself after the confusion and chaos of narcissistic abuse. Some episodes will be solo. Others will include guest interviews. All of them will be honest, grounded, and deeply compassionate. So, whether you're just realizing what you've lived through, or you've been on this path and you're ready for the next layer of your healing, you are welcome here. This is not about perfection. This is about reclamation. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Reclamation Room, the podcast for women healing from narcissistic abuse. I recognize that a lot of people listening to this podcast might not have necessarily been through narcissistic abuse. And this hit me especially hard recently because I was listening to an audiobook called Psychopath Free. This was recommended to me by a friend a long time ago, and I finally got around to listening to it. And as I was listening, I thought, wow, this is so in-depth and detailed. That this is obviously a person who has been through exactly this. And someone listening to this is going to resonate and realize this is exactly what they have been dealing with. And in this show, I think that we go through or go over some topics and dynamics that don't just apply to narcissistic abuse. And I started thinking about this in terms of what else might people be going through or have gone through, and then they'll come and listen to the show that we can talk about, that we can explore, dig deeper into, hopefully help with. That's always my hope. But one that I realized that became particularly clear to me from my own experience, but also from a coaching standpoint, because a lot of sessions lately have focused on this one specific topic, and it's one that I struggled with myself. And it is feeling like this constant sense of unfinished business, or something doesn't quite add up and I just can't get closure on the situation. And so this could be your mind circling back, trying to focus on something that makes some small bit of sense, finding a place to land safely amidst all the confusion. And this leads to that frantic feeling that we fall into sometimes, where we're replaying conversations, thinking of things that we should have said in the moment and they only just occurred to us now, trying to sort through exactly what happened word for word. And I don't know about you, but I became really skilled at like remembering conversations verbatim, so that I could go back and track through exactly what happened, exactly when I started to get a heightened sense of emotions, when everything went downhill, so that I can finally explain it to them in a way that they're going to understand and it's going to get them to listen to me. And then another one that I would constantly try to accomplish is getting the truth out of this person or these people, which ran me ragged, if I'm being honest. And so I think it boils down to this feeling that if we could just find closure of that sort, if we could just make things make sense, then maybe we could move on. Maybe we could, if we're still in that relationship, maybe things will be okay. But if we're out of it, and this is specifically what I'm speaking to today, then maybe I'll be okay and maybe things will start to feel better. But I wanted to kind of walk through in this episode, part of the reason at least, why closure might feel so like just out of reach. And I think it's because we're reaching for closure in places where it was never really the right environment for that to happen. It was never set up for closure to happen. And first I want to talk about why we do this. Our brain is wired to survive, right? And it's also wired to seek resolution and to make things make sense, to have a cohesive story that makes sense to us so that if we face that thing again, we know what's happening. We know what to do with it. And so one maybe fallback, maybe also a really cool part of being a human is that we do have this higher level of thinking. And so when something doesn't make sense to us, especially for some people, it's really hard to just let it go. And our brain might want to keep scanning and searching and trying to figure out that missing puzzle piece that will help us solve the issue. And this is especially true when something is really emotionally intense or painful or important to us. And so when we've been in relationships that were painful, those dynamics were completely full of contradictions. There was no sense of words matching actions. We would hear one thing and then we would see another. Our reality was constantly shifting around us. We constantly had to shift ourselves to fit into someone else's reality. A lot of times I found myself saying, I'm not allowed to talk about these things that are hurting my feelings or that are upsetting me, or ways that I keep being disappointed and let down because I was told one thing and another thing is happening. I would say, I'm not allowed to talk about those things because then it upsets your reality that everything is fine. And then the cycle starts because then the arguing happens and everything just got way blown out of proportion from there. And it's that sense of, when it's good, but when it's bad, it's really bad. And so that's how it happened for me. My reality kept having to match up to someone else's reality. And if I strayed from that, it wasn't okay. And so there were these situations where I felt deeply connected to this person and also very deeply hurt because I wasn't seeming to receive that back. And so my brain, our brain, when we go through something like this, our brain is a lot of times saying, okay, so what really happened here? Like, what in the world? What did I just go through? What really happened in that argument? What am I really up against here? And so our brain is going to try to organize the experience into something that is clean and concise and understandable. A lot of times one that we could speak to another person. I don't know about you, but I found myself constantly telling the people what I had been through and telling the same stories over and over again. And a problem with that is that we're trying to organize this cohesive narrative, but the truth under all of that kind of smacks you in the face at some point is there was no consistency in the relationship to organize. There was no consistency, like we said, in words versus actions. There was no consistency in, I love you, but then this is how I'm going to treat you. That doesn't make sense to us. And so we keep trying to make it make sense, and it doesn't. So it's really endearing to think about humans in this way because, of course, we want connection. We want to feel loved. We love deeply. That's something that we want to share with people. And so we think to ourselves, like, if we could just get this person to explain themselves honestly and finally face things, maybe this would start to be better. Or if we could just get them to admit what they did, then, they can apologize and I can feel seen and validated in this situation. And then we can move on, right? Like, it's not the end of the world. Or if they would just like validate for a second what I've been experiencing and what they've put me through, then maybe I could take a deep breath and things can start to feel okay. And what we're doing here makes so much sense. It's something that we do from childhood on. We're trying to cling to or restore a sense of something that we deeply need, to feel safe, and that's coherence. We need to be able to have a reality that's in alignment with our perception of reality, right? And so during a relationship like that, our reality kept getting disrupted completely over and over and over again. We would experience one thing, we would be told that it wasn't real. We would notice patterns, and then we were overthinking or overreacting, or we would get hurt, and then that was minimized or flipped back around onto us. And I'll say here that if you are like me, we were doing inner work along the way too. Like, it's not like we've just been blaming everything on this one person. Like, we are trying to. And we're not perfect. So, of course, there's things that we could have handled better too. And I recognize that. But our system is really trying to repair a sense of relational rupture that happened with this person. And the really hard part about that, the really painful truth about this whole situation, is that closure requires truth. It requires a sense of consistency. It requires someone who is able and willing to acknowledge reality, for us to be in a shared sense of reality, for words to start to match actions. And even if the truth is not the truth that we want to hear, we still need that in order to have that sense of closure. And that's the thing that was missing all along. We didn't get the truth of this person. We didn't get consistency in what was happening there. And so when we go back to that same dynamic, that same person, those same memories, looking for closure from the same source that caused the disconnect in the first place, we just end up back in the same loop of thinking. And so we have the confusion, we have the doubt, we have the questions, and we essentially are looking back to this person, this relationship with this person, looking for clarity. But we've got to understand that the dynamic that happened with that person, that relationship itself, relied on instability. It required us to be left feeling unclear in order for that reality to keep happening. And if that person was benefiting or comfortable in that reality, they're not going to want clarity. They're not going to want that same coherence that you're looking for here. So I want you to know too that there's also a sense of conditioning here that we go through. And in the show notes, I'm actually going to link a blog post also, which looks at the trauma bond in terms of, is this an addiction or is this a choice? Why does this keep happening? But I want you to know that when we are in these painful relationships, we're being trained, per se, even if slowly, to keep going back to this person for resolution. Because if something felt off to us, or there was a disagreement, we went to this person to try to talk it through. That's what you do in a healthy relationship. And when they hurt us, we would come to them and we would look to have it fixed. And every time things broke down in the relationship, we would turn to them and we would try to repair it. That's what you do. But every single time that happened, we would get just enough of a response for us to still be hopeful that the next time would be better, that the next time they would understand a little bit more, or that the next time it was going to be different than it was this time. And it typically wasn't a complete discard or withdrawal. There was at least enough given there to keep us hoping, even if it was just in body language or a smile as someone walked away, something, even a text to check on you to see if you're okay. There was something there that convinced us that there was still enough hope that it might be different next time. And as someone who has also been through abusive or even violent situations, sometimes that thing, it's that you have children together, or it's that you have friends together, or shared life, that if we can just get it together enough for these people, then things will continue being normal and okay. So I want you to know that's normal too. That's actually what kept the loop alive and happening over and over again. And so now, even if that's over, your system is still doing what it learned that whole time, because it became familiar. You walked that same path. And so go back there, go back in your memories, go try again to see if you can make sense of it, because maybe this time it will. So I kind of want to flip the script here a little bit in how we're looking at closure, because for me, as a verbal processor, closure for me has always been a conversation. It's always been, withdrawal was awful for me. I could not stand that. It was immediate abandonment to me when someone withdrew from a conversation, and I would just keep going after it. We've got to talk this through. We've got to figure this out. And I've had to learn to kind of take a step back and realize, wait, That's not how everyone processes things. But closure itself isn't what I was getting when out of that conversation. Like, closure is not just what happens when you talk to someone. It's not just that moment when they finally say the right thing or getting your point across to them so that they'll finally understand it. That's not what we're actually seeking here, even though it feels good to think that it is, because then we have control over the situation, right? Then we can do something about it. But what real closure is when you're in these painful emotional dynamics, it's not the conversation, it's not the finally being believed. It's when your mind and your body finally come into agreement about what it is that you've experienced, or what you've been experiencing, or what you are experiencing. And so this isn't requiring you to ask them to agree with your reality. And it's not allowing them to define your reality. It's the moment that you are able to say, listen, like, this is what I felt. This is what I saw in that moment. This is how it affected me. This is what happened to me. And it's the moment that that's actually enough. No one else has to validate it and agree and say, yes, I did that to you. That was awful of me. And I think there's a piece of this too that we've kind of been conditioned in a way to abandon that part of ourselves, the part that really knows and can confirm for ourselves. I think we've been taught to look to an authority to tell us, yes, that's the right way to do it. Yes, that's the right way to feel. Yes, that's the right way to respond. I mean, I can't tell you how many times in a session I've had people tell me how they're feeling and then ask me if that's okay. I did it too. I did it in sessions with people too. Like, am I crazy for feeling this way? And the answer is no, you're not. No, you're absolutely not. You may have been through something crazy, but what you're feeling is what you're feeling. And when you start to feel into that and say, this is what happened to me, nobody can negate it. That's a sense of closure in itself that feels different because it's not that familiar loop that you're used to. And it feels uncomfortable because it's relying on yourself when we've been taught not to do so. And so this one might feel really subtle to people. It might feel like, yeah, okay, I need to just sit and feel my feelings. But what comes from that is even more powerful than just sitting and feeling your feelings. Because once that moment happens, that's when you stop trying to get answers for everything. And it's not overnight. I mean, you may still feel the need to go back and figure out what all the lies were, or figure out who all the people were that they were, harming you with. And that's okay. I'm not going to judge you for that. But in the midst of this process, when you finally are able to validate what you're feeling, you also start learning that it's safe to trust your truth, and you start telling yourself the truth, and you stop trying to understand so much why they did what they did, and start to focus more on what that did in you, what happened in you, what, pieces of you feel like they're not there anymore, and maybe you want to get them back, or what pieces of you came online during that awful situation and you want to let those go. You start focusing more on your life and your possibilities, and dare I say, your hope, even though I know for a lot of us after the fact that can feel really hard to come by. But this is the piece that, even though it's subtle, you slowly start focusing less and less on this person, and it's not so much resolving it with them anymore, and it's more resolving what's happening within yourself, and making peace with the process that got you here. I know everyone says forgiveness is so important in this journey. I think self-forgiveness is not given enough credit here, and I think that when we start to feel that, I think that's when the trauma loop starts to quiet down and we start to feel a little bit safer. So here at the end, I do want to say, if you're still craving that closure, no judgment. You're not weak. You're not stuck. It's not that there's no hope for you. Maybe for you, it just means that your system is still trying to make sense of something that never really made sense. I mean, honestly, when there's inconsistencies repeatedly, who can make sense of that? And yet we're going to try. We're going to try to. And there may be a part of you that still believes that there's some sense of clarity for you out there with that person. But I really would love to tell you right now, the clarity that you need is actually living inside of you every single time that you take a breath and feel emotion and feel passion about something and get a spark of joy at something that you didn't even realize made you happy. And it doesn't happen always all at once. It's not always some huge realization where everything clicks and you feel healed. Again, with everything that I share in this show, this comes over time in small moments where you do slowly, I mean, it still happens for me sometimes, so I'm not saying this is a one and done, but you start questioning yourself less and less, and you start to really trust the feedback that you're getting from your environment as it filters through you and your emotions. And you start to believe your own experience and make decisions based from that. And it's the really, really big decisions, even though these are small moments, where you decide to stop going back and asking again or trying to revisit and make sense again. So from a survivor standpoint, that is a lot of times what closure actually looks like. I will say there's a grieving side of this too, because there may always be details that we don't get to know. And that's awful. That's really painful. And I don't in any way want to invalidate that. And I want to say that if that's where you're at, then feel what you need to feel and just take it one moment at a time, one day at a time. Do what is helpful for you. Focus on self-care. Even if it's just a hot shower, try to do that. Try to do things that are nurturing to you, calming to your body, and just really be where you're at so that maybe the mind can stop spinning, looking for that elsewhere. I promise in time it does come a little bit easier until one day you look back and you realize it doesn't actually hurt as badly as it used to. But that moment doesn't often happen when we're still in that seeking of clarity in the relationship, in the other person, or in the stories of what happened. So just a couple of reflective questions here. I've tended to do this lately. And this could apply to relationships. This could apply to past, family situations. This could apply even right now in your life without another person involved. But you can ask yourself, what is something that I already know? I already know to be true inside of myself, but I'm looking to other people to confirm it for me before I let myself believe it. And then another one could be, where am I still waiting for permission to trust myself? This is a really, really big one for a lot of people. It was for me. For me, it was, who am I looking for validation from? Who am I looking for acceptance of my opinions? Who am I still wanting to get that nod of approval from? And then the last one here is, what would it feel like to let my understanding be enough? What would that genuinely feel like? Taking a moment to really visualize it, put yourself there, let it sink into your body, and just feel what another experience is like. Sometimes that's enough to get us off of that thinking process and back into our bodies. So that's it for the episode today. I want to say too, if this is something that you are facing, struggling with, have struggled with in the past, or just want to chat about it, you are welcome to come to our Tuesday evening Women's Circle. It's a free Zoom call. Camera and microphone are optional. You don't have to talk if you don't want to, but you can also email me anytime. My email is ashana@wayhomewellness.com. I'll also leave those in the show notes below. And if this episode resonated for you, please consider sharing with a friend. Subscribe, follow, leave a rating or review, whatever works for you. It helps the show and it helps more people get this information. And as always, feedback is welcome. If there's any topics that you have faced and you want to hear about it, and maybe you've got more to add to this conversation, that's cool too. Leave it in the comments below and I try my best to get back to them. But as always, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next one. Thanks for spending time in the Reclamation Room. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if this supported you, consider sharing it or leaving a review. You're not alone, and your reclamation is sacred.